at shadows and light cast. First thing to, before we actually learn how to paint them, first thing to do is to see them. Now, if you look at the bottle, you will see that there is a shadow on this side, and there's a light patch on the other side where the light source is striking the bottle. If we look at the box, the light is striking this face of the bottle very strongly. This surface is slightly darker than this surface, and this surface is even darker than that surface, and the one you can't see around the back is practically black. Okay, so those are the lights, those are the dark places and the light places when the light source is on the left-hand side of the picture. If we change our stance and come here, the light is falling full on the bottle and there are no shadows on it at all. This little part of the box is catching full light and everything else is very much darker. If we come this way, there we are, you'll see that this face is dark, this face is lighter. So in this case, that's the light surface, and this is the darker one. And the bottle has a very light patch down that side, and practically all of the bottle is in shadow. At the light source, you'll see that the bottle is totally black. These two faces of the box are very, very dark. This is the only part catching the light. So where your light source is, it alters as you look at the object, depending on where you are. The only other thing I want you to notice is what I call the contact shadow, which is this dark line here where the box meets the surface. That's quite important because it anchors the box on the surface. And the same is true around the bottom of the bottle. Now we are going to look at how to make this appear to be in 3 dimensions using watercolor, and using watercolor as watercolor likes to be used. The first thing to do is to ascertain where the light source is. In this case, I'm bringing the light from this side, so this side will catch the light, this side will be in shadow, this will catch the light, that will be slightly more shadowed, and that will be even more shadowed, because the light is coming from slightly up and slightly to the left of the painting. Now, what you need to do to create a 3-dimensional appearance on a bottle or a cylinder of any sort is to slightly fade in the shadow, or slightly fade in the light over the shadow. So you don't want a firm edge. What I'm going to do is wet the whole bottle shape just with clean water. And I can use the flat of the brush to do this. I don't want to soak the paper, I just want it wet. And I'm just going to use the shape of the bottle, which I've drawn on here. So that is, if you look at it sideways, you can see how the light is catching the water, and then you know how much your bottle is wetted. I'm just going to use blue because it shows up well on the picture. Of course, I've done this the wrong way around for me being left-handed, as it's only a demonstration. Never mind, we'll carry on. So what you then do is just put a stroke of the paint down the shadowed side of the bottle. So just a stroke of the paint down the shadowed side of the bottle. And let nature take its course. I can see already it's bleeding over into the water. The longer I leave it, the more it's going to bleed. There's a slight indiscretion here. While it's so wet, and this is a non-staining paint, I can push that back in a bit if I feel it's being a bit too adventurous. All you need is a slightly dry brush. Just push the paint back. I have, in fact, disturbed the paint doing that, so I'm not going to play on anymore. There we are. Okay, so just leave that to bleed over. And in doing so, if it's not doing it enough, lift the page so that it bleeds a bit more. What you want is a soft edge here. You need a hard edge here and a soft edge there. Now, if I want to make that side of the bottle stand out, the thing to do is to just paint in some background. So I'll take the same blue, much paler, and just go around the outside of the bottle here. Just to say this part is in shadow and I want to in the light and I want to show it up. When that's dry, I'll put in the contact shadow. Now, fortuitously, that looks a bit like a screw top on the bottle, which is rather nice, isn't it? Okay, now don't play with it. Leave it alone. Let's look at the box. Now, in this case, the light is catching this face of the box. This face is quite dark, and since I've got the dark paint on my brush, I'm going to put the dark paint in. Again, use the whole brush where you can. And because I wanted a little paler on the top, I'm going to add a bit of water to that mix. Now, this face is wet. If I bring this down and put it, make it touch this, I'll get a cauliflower of water in this surface here, which I don't want. The way around that, when you bring the paint down, is to make a very thin space across there. So that this doesn't quite match. You can get the space quite thin if you turn your paper around. I'm sorry if that makes everybody dizzy. All right. You can make it quite a thin line just by edging up to it. And those little lines are not wrong. They add sparkle, they add interest. They help define things a little bit more. Now, if the shadow is coming this way, then I will have a shadow from the bottle, which helps define it, coming this way. And this box will throw a shadow. No, I've got that wrong, haven't I? Silly me. Right. That's wrong. So let's just take that out. Just pretend that's like that. This is casting a shadow this way. Hello. Got to keep your wits about you when you're doing this. So this is casting a shadow this way. Again, I don't want it to run, so I'm leaving that thin line there.
We can't see.
Of the box. Sorry. Leaving a thin line there. And then it would cast a shadow up the box. And across the top of the box. Ooh, isn't that nice? And I can't see what happens to the shadow over there because the surface is below vision. So that gives you that idea of the bottle, casting its shadow over there. And all these surfaces would have a very fine contact shadow. Which is probably too early, but we'll put it in anyway.
It's a very fine contact shadow. And down here, it's a very fine contact shadow. And it will go through that shadow here, and there'll be a fine contact shadow there too. In that way, so the shadow of the box won't be very visible, and it'll be over here. Yeah, so that gives you an idea of how to get the appearance of 3 dimensions.
I can't see the bottom. Oh, there we are. Okay.
So just to recap, if you want a soft edge, you run the paint into water so that it softens the edge as it comes down here. If you want a hard edge, you paint on dry paper. You get a very sharp, hard edge. This contact shadow I've made a bit thick. I really should have made it thin. I used a thinner brush, but there we are. I do tend to hurry these things. So those are the things you need to remember when you're trying to paint in 3 dimensions.